Alright, it's time for a tradie's point of view. I've, let me first say, I have the utmost respect for Australia's First Nation and traditional people in their knowledge and their ability in this country. I don't believe in barriers that should be holding them back. Unfortunately there are, but those barriers aren't all our society to blame. It comes back to the First Nations people. We've been watching on the news about the kids running riot in Alice Springs. We've watched how the women are being raped and abused in Alice Springs and right across communities, especially the western suburbs of New South Wales is very high and proportionate compared to urban living. And I got to ask, I've seen them on the TV saying, all this needs to happen. What needs to happen exactly? Like, there was the death of an Aboriginal lady from domestic violence, which is tragic beyond belief. She was very liked in the community. She was very active in the community, and it's a loss of life that is going to make a big dent in the future. I'm saddened by it, but I'm not sure how anyone can help. Let's deal with the first subject. Let's deal with the one that is on the news right now about the women being abused with domestic violence and rape in communities. Now, for many years, going back from what I read on the government documents right back to the 1950s, there has been a culture of acceptance of this behaviour, and there has been a culture of hiding the truth, because not necessarily because they want to, but because the community knows the community. Like, if I lived in a small community of less than 5,000 people, it's pretty much you're all family, and who wants to dob in your family, so, and then if you do dob in the person, well, then you're at odds with their family. So if the person does wind up in jail, well, then their family hates the victim because they've got their family member locked up. So for a long time in the communities, it's been acceptable to keep quiet. It's been, and if you speak to most people in communities going back 10, 15 years, they will tell you it didn't happen in this community. There's a report there from a doctor that he's only been there for, they didn't name the suburb, the town he's in, but he'd been working there for 5 years, and prior to him opening up his clinic, there was no sex abuse in the community at all. Well, it didn't just happen when he came there, did it? Like, it's been there the whole time, but unfortunately a lot of these communities don't have the ability or the community support to report these crimes. Now, it's good to see a small number of women stepping up, but this apparently affects more than 80% of women in rural community, that they are abused domestically, they are physically abused, and they are sexually abused. And yet the number of women standing up and saying something is only small. So there's been a lot of government research, there's been a lot of information gathering. There has been a report put out with recommendations, but the government has failed to put money into those recommendations. I don't know what they are yet. I'm still researching this topic. It will be a future video I'll follow up on. I'd really be interested to see what the report come out with as resolutions to this, because I can't see a resolution, to be honest. It's wrong by all means. It's wrong by everyone's culture that it's wrong, but how do you fix a wrong that's accepted in a community? It makes it near impossible, because for a long time, since I've been growing up, it's been on the news since I was a kid, when we went through all the First Nations recognition, which was valuable. It's needed. They do need to be recognised. They do need to be accounted for, and they are such a great people to know. I've only ever met probably 2 Aboriginals in my life that I wouldn't want to spend a minute with. But the rest of them, and I've met quite a few, I'll give you the day of bread. You know, it's you could talk to them all day long about their culture, their beliefs, what they know about the country. You know, the information they have is renowned. But a lot of it's been lost, and they'll tell you that. A lot of their culture's been lost. And with all that comes problems, you know, with integrating with a new society that came here. Everyone, they big protests about it all the time now. They call it Invasion Day, which, you know, to a culture of a country would see it as that. But because along with that came things like alcohol, drugs, petrol, spray cans, and a lot of those items are used for abuse in communities. Now, when they ban alcohol in a community, it's usually the community that's asking for it to be banned. But then once it's banned, everyone's classified as a racist for not selling it to them. And then if you lock up the criminal, you're racist because there's more Aboriginals in jail than white. But there's more whites than Chinese, there's more whites than Japanese, and there's more whites than any other culture in Australia. So you're racist for that. If the police attend a domestic violence matter, normally what can they do? If they help you, they're racist. If they don't help you, they're negligent. Really what I think the community needs in wider Australia is a definition of what do you want? Because everything we do is wrong, everything we don't do is wrong, and there's no win. Or what would it take for our government to be able to make this a win? Like, I can understand you want less sexual assaults, less abuse. That 100%, nobody should be living like that. But to do that, logistically, the police would have to lock up the men. A lot of them. Because there's a lot of it going on. And not just outside men, but husbands and boyfriends. From what I read in the statistics trade there, that a lot of Aboriginal juveniles are using sex for money, for alcohol, for drugs. You know, so they're giving it to someone, and it's acceptable. There was a nurse on the news just 3 days ago, saying that she's seen as young as 2 months old being sexually violated. Come on. She witnessed an 8-year-old who showed no emotion whatsoever because it's a normal thing. Come on. Like, you know, it doesn't matter what we do, like, as a society, it's wrong. Like, if this was happening in any major capital city or most rural places around, then we would lock up the perpetrator and we would have those kids into some form of care. And then from that we would have counselling and other medical professionals assisting to try and help the child through the problem. And yet that's the one thing I hear missing on all the news channels. No one's mentioning the children. You'll get thousands out for a protest day for Invasion Day. You'll get 50 people out for a protest for women domestic violence. I don't understand it. Look, to be honest, screw Invasion Day. Like, okay, you can deal with that later on, you know, but your personal safety is much more valuable and crucial than a political protest. It's a political protest. Who cares? The day will come. Don't worry, the day will come. You know, society changes over the years, and what's not norm today won't be norm later on, and something else will become a norm. You know, the country's gone through great developments, you know, over the years. There's been, like, you know, we've had First Nations recognition. You go back 30 years, 40 years, I bet you that wasn't even on the cards. Like, who would go for that? You know, but all of a sudden, the society has changed. It sees things that it didn't see before because a lot of people don't have the knowledge. Nobody researches this stuff to find out what's really going on to create what's happening. So I like to research these things because this is one that's valuable to me. I've been a victim of domestic violence. I know what it's like. Not to the level that the Aboriginal women are copping and the Aboriginal children are copping, but still the same. I went to work with black eyes, busted lips, big lumps all over my arms and legs, and I allowed it to happen. And that's the same thing for your community. You're allowing this to happen. Now you're trying to stand up and make a voice, and now you're saying that the government's not doing its bit. I'm not sure what it is you want them to do exactly, because going by the government documents and all the briefs that I've read, a lot of the time it's socially acceptable because of community pressure. So really comes down to, you need these rural communities to be able to start saying, no, this is not okay, this is not all right. And a lot of it does come back to drugs, alcohol, petrol sniffing, spray can sniffing, or watching porn and just being bored. I can understand it. I can understand where it comes from. The lack of jobs, the lack of feeling respected. But you got to understand that the majority of people that at least I've had to deal with in my time on this planet, and especially now that I'm in this particular line of work as a tradie, I deal with a lot of people, and I can honestly say you're respected more than you believe. You can say you're not respected, but that's not true. The majority of people I know 100% respect the Aboriginals and the Aboriginal culture and the diversity in which it brings to our country. There is still a long road ahead. There is still a long road ahead, because it's not so much the general community that won't change. It's government that won't change. People think that the government works for the people. It doesn't. It is a business, and they don't give a shit, not about you or not about me. And that's a fact. Until you start voicing exactly what you want on wide forums and getting a lot of people talking about it and putting pressure on local members, to put pressure on state members, to put pressure on federal members, nothing's going to change. Nothing. But to do it, you can't do a bit. You have to do it 100%. You have to put forward the physical domestic violence, the alcohol abuse, the drug abuse, the petrol sniffing abuse, the spray can abuse, the child sex abuse. You have to put it all on the table, which means you have to bring your community into question. That's all you got to do. Really, that's what I can see that you need to do. Like, if there's someone with a better idea, go for it. But from what I can see and what I know of all the things I've done in my life, making it public and putting it out there and just wearing the responsibility and wearing the shame of what's happened, it's the only way. You look at any court case that's had, massive sexual abuse, like the idiot from the US who was abusing children through England and all that sort of stuff. I can't remember his name off the top of my head because I'm glad he's dead. But anyway, it took a small number of people to step up and get a large number of people behind them, and then more victims come forward. You've taken the first step, a small number of you have stood up, but you only covered 1% of the whole issue. You're not covering the whole issue. You need to come forward and put it all on the table, because only then will the public out here go, oh my God, this happens? They don't know. They don't know. Foreign students are only being taught that Australia's racist against the Aboriginals and we stole their land and we stole their children. That's not true. It's true that those things happen, but that's not the whole story. And until the whole story is heard and everything is put in perspective, the healing can't begin. It just can't, because the whole truth hasn't been heard. You know, you hear foreign students, they'll say, oh, this is a free country. Well, why is it there's towns you drive in, you can't take a photo? It's not because the town's of top secret classification. It's just wrong. And sorry, I was just getting a phone call, just checking it. And it's just like, you need to own it. That's the only way. You need to own it and put it out there. Nobody's going to look down upon you. Like, they will in your community, but they won't in the wider Australia, which is where you need the people to know, to put the pressure on the government to do something. Now, there has been recommendations made in the report. The government hasn't put funding towards it. Why not? I can tell you, no one out here knows. Unless you do what I do, sit down on the computer, Google the government documents, find out the statistics and go, really? That's shocking. That is shocking. Like an 80% of physical domestic violence, rape, drug and alcohol abuse. Come on. Really? But it's not acceptable. If it was happening in the metropolitan areas, our jails, we'd be building 10 a day because they'd be locking everyone up. But because you're isolated, because you don't have the resources to back you up, you're being persecuted. That's what you're doing. You're being persecuted. So the only way you're going to get this out is for all of you to start standing up and worrying about this first. You know, don't care about the Invasion Day stuff, because the Invasion Day stuff, that will change in time. It will, 100%, because new generations grow up with a different perspective to older generations. You know, you go back to the World War II generation and you had hatred towards countries we were at war with. These generations are acceptable to those countries because, well, I haven't been at war with them, and I find their culture to be quite interesting, and I love meeting people from other cultures. But for the average Joe Blow, if he doesn't know, he doesn't care. Until you make them know, until you make them see just how bad this is. You know, you like when I saw the stuff on the news about Alice Springs women being assaulted and abused, they showed, I don't know, maybe 10 women, and that's it. And those 10 women are tragic. You know, it's a tragic abuse for those 10 women. But from a wider community perspective, that's the same in metropolitan areas. I can get 10 women who have been domestically abused too. But until you show physical proof, and I'm not talking, you don't need to prove it, not to me. I've seen the government documents. I know what you're going through. I've seen it. I've read it. But you've got to show the broader community on platforms like this, on the news, everywhere, and put the numbers out there. And don't be shy to talk about the child abuse, because it starts there. Because these children grow up. Those children are already damaged. And then we blame the children for being out in the street, causing havoc. They're disillusioned. The people that were meant to be saving them has crossed them. You know, what respect would they have of themselves, let alone the community? You know, they've had everything ripped out from under them from young. You know, it's like, well, how do you then combat that? Well, until you start speaking about the secrecy of that, the longer it's going to take to resolve the whole situation. You've got to come out and just put it on the table. Go on the news and put it on the news that these are the numbers. These are the statistics. The government's got them, they know. But they're not going to do anything. It costs them money. They're not going to do anything until the wider community stands up for the Aboriginal women and children and said, that's enough. We want money put into this. It's not going to happen. It's not going to happen until you stand up and put the information out there for the wider community to see. And when they get appalled and disgraced, only then will our government stand up and go, okay, let's do something. It's happened before. Look at the Mabo thing. The Mabo thing was in a court case and it didn't have any support when it first started. By the time it finished, it had a majority support across Australia. Look at the Say Sorry thing. It didn't have any support in the early years. By the end of it, you had the support of most of Australia, and, people cheered for it. We wanted it. So when you look at the wider community, we're not against you. We want you to be safe. We want your children to be safe. The statistics are just, wow. It is mind-boggling. And until people start talking about it and getting it out there and really making people aware that Aboriginal women and children are being abused and raped on numbers you cannot even fathom. And it needs to stop. These people are valued. Like, they're the last of an ancient culture. The knowledge they have of Australia is remarkable. And all that knowledge is dying because of all this rubbish that's happening around them. And what can you do? Like, what can I do as a sole citizen of, sole slave of the Australian government? What can I do? Well, I can do this. I can start trying to make people aware that they need to start looking into this and put pressure on governments to do something. How about by enacting the resolutions of the inquiries you've carried out? There's solutions to this, but it costs money, and a lot of it, because these small communities, especially under 5,000 people, they really need help right now. They really need the support. And look, I'll be honest with you, I don't give a stuff about Invasion Day or Australia. I don't give a stuff. At the end of the day, I'll celebrate the end of the World War, I'll celebrate all those sort of stuff, but Invasion Day, I'm not going to protest against it, and Australia Day, I'm not going to protest for it. At the end of the day, it's just a holiday for me. Like, I work, so I don't care. It's not important. Really, it's not. It's political. It's not valuable. Like, it's okay if you want to move the day because it's an insult to the Aboriginal people if that's how you see it, but then it's an insult to the other side if they move it. So, but for me, I think that is a petty thing. I think it's so petty. I think way more needs to be put on to the safety of the Aboriginal women and the safety of the Aboriginal children first. I think that is priority number one. And I think until people start getting out there and voicing their concerns for this and letting the Aboriginal people know that we support them, like, it's not all Aboriginal men, don't get me wrong. I've met numerous Aboriginal men and they have got to be the most genuine, gold-hearted people I've ever met, and straight down shoot. What you see is what you get, and very respected and highly valued. But for the ones that are committing these crimes, turn a leaf. Your day's coming. The Aboriginal community is starting to voice their concerns. The day of reckoning is coming. But when these things come into effect, don't start crying out that it's racist because these things are coming into effect. You need something to come into effect. If the government did what they do in metropolitan areas, they would lock up the men and they would take away your kids. That's it. Non-negotiable. And then what? Another stolen generation, more protests because there's Aboriginals in jail. But what's the alternative? I would really love to hear, failing the government putting in these recommendations of the report, which I will guarantee you I will find them and read them. I'm not sure if their recommendations even worth talking about because it's government and they really don't give a shit. But I think until the government gets the pressure from the people in the wider community, well, it's not going to happen. But I can tell you now, you got one trader who's on your side. I'll voice my opinion, and yes, I think this needs to stop, and yes, I think they need to do something about it. Exactly what? Look, I don't know. It starts off with the Aboriginal community. You guys have got to stand up. You've got to take ownership, and you've got to make this known. If you don't, you're just costing another generation. The longer you hold off, the longer it'll take to fix. It can be fixed. I know it can be fixed, but it's going to take time. I wouldn't be wasting a day, because I got to tell you, if that was my family, I would be horrified. I'd want to take someone out and knock their heads off, but, this is your culture, and it's the lack of knowledge of the wider community that don't know what happens in rural communities because we don't see it. Like, I've seen a little bit when I've travelled around the places I've travelled, right out to Uluru and Alice Springs. I've seen what alcohol and that does. I've seen it here in Brisbane City, so I've seen a little bit, but I haven't seen what happens behind closed doors. I have no knowledge, and it's only because I saw these reports on TV that I'm even becoming knowledged. But I think the wider community really needs to start getting their heads into gear and educating themselves on what's happening, because the death rate of children and women is just remarkable. Like, it's sometimes triple and 5 times more than urban areas. So you got to wonder, who's doing something. I watched a report about an Aboriginal woman who called for help. Police turned up and they didn't even bother trying. And I can understand their side as to why they didn't, because when they do, no one does anything anyway. So I can understand why they're like that, because of all the if they do the wrong thing by the guy, or if the guy is completely hostile and he ends up getting shot because he's pulled a weapon out and attacked them, then there's protests about a Black Death in custody. You got to really draw the clear lines as to what you want. You need to get on the media and tell the media what it is you exactly want. Do you want to take this down this road and resolve this problem? If so, you've got to own it. Let the people know the full facts. I saw a First Nations lady and she talked about the rape and abuse of women and the safety of the children at home. Not once did she mention the rape and abuse of children. She just said, for other reasons. You've got to own it. You've got to tell people. It's not embarrassing. It's embarrassing for the person involved. It's not embarrassing for members of your community who are leaders to stand up and say, this needs to stop, this is what's happening. They have to say it. The government will do nothing until you do. Until you stir the emotion in the public, the government will do nothing. You need to stir the emotions of the public to win this fight. Until then, more of you will die, more children will die, more will be raped, more will be abused. You have to own it. You can't just deal with the adult side of it. Because if you deal with the adult side of it, then resolutions will resolve in adult counselling, adult care, adult support. You will not get the support for the children, you will not get the care for the children, and you will not get the backup. So you have to come out and own it. Once you own it, then you will stir the emotions of the community. But while you're not owning it, there are going to be a lot of people out there who are going to watch the news and go, oh well, because they don't know. It's not that they don't care. If they knew the situation, if they knew the numbers, if they knew the statistics, my God, there isn't a family out there who won't care. You will get the support. You will get the backup. You will get the funding. Start making a voice. Start owning it. And let's get this talk on the way. It's a talk we don't want to have. It's a talk that I was even nervous even doing this interview. Like, I'm thinking to myself, does it then betray me as being racist because I'm now saying stuff about my First Nations people that I know they want to talk about, I know they need to talk about, but yet there's still the installation of being silent. The government documents have documented the facts. They know about it. They know the statistics. They've interviewed people. Like, there was one interview session went for about 3,000 people of First Nation, and not one of them could come out and say, well, I don't know anyone who hasn't been sexually abused or physically abused. How is that even possible? I can go to my neighbour, he doesn't know anyone who's been sexually abused or physically abused. Out of 3,000 people? Come on. This needs to be spoke about. And we need the First Nations people to come out and own it. We need you to come out and say it. We need you to come out and put the numbers down so that the wider community can see for themselves what's going on. Well, from a tradie's point of view, I'm one who's really concerned, because I've always thought that the healing of our nation starts with the First Nations people. It really does. You know, whether we change the date of Australia Day or not, I don't really care. If the Aboriginals find it that offensive that, you know, hundreds of thousands get out and protest every year, then okay, I'm all for it. I don't really care. You know, it only celebrates the day they landed on the country. You know, it's nothing special. It's just they were here and then they left. You know, so I really feel that if you're as passionate as I am about healing this country from the inside, then we have to start with the safety of First Nations people. The knowledge they've got, the abilities they've got, indescribable. The stories they've got that are still untold, unimaginable. But we need those stories. We need to know our history. We need to know the history of this country, you know. And it's just getting killed and wiped off the planet. And it can't happen. It really can't happen. It shouldn't be happening in 2023. Come on. We're supposed to be a first grade nation. You know, we're taxed to the shit through the eyeballs. It's not like the government can't find the funding. They bloody well can, you know. So they're all for putting themselves on a pay rise. Oh yeah, we need a pay rise because I passed a bill on the McCall chicken the other day. Yeah, but you won't pass a bill and pay for it when it comes to the life safety of Aboriginal women and Aboriginal children. I'm disgraced. I'm disgraced at our government. Seriously. They've known about this since the 1950s. It is now 2023. Are you kidding me? It takes you 70 years? You've known about it. You've witnessed it. You've reported it. And now it's getting worse. And still, our government sits there and does nothing for these people. I'm disgusted. I'm one disgusted tradie. Well, I'd love to hear your comments. I hope, for God, you share this video and get it out there and get people talking, because First Nations people need our help. First Nation people need our support. And the only way this is going to stop is if we as a major community stand up and go, get our politicians' asses into gear, get them out there and get this fixed. Because it can be, bloody oath it can be, in consultation with the First Nation elders and the women and the children, it can be absolutely fixed. Because it's not like that in the urban society. It doesn't have to be out like that in the rural. It's rubbish, you know. The acceptance of this is ridiculous, and I'm for one against it. So I'd like to put it out there to our Australian government. Pull your finger out of your ass. You've got the recommendations. You've got the funding. Do what needs to be done to protect these people, because they're too valuable to lose to this shit. You know, we're not even at war. You know, we're here in our own country and we can't get our shit together. You know, these people need our help. So up to you, Mr. Prime Minister. Get your finger out your ass and help these people, because I've had enough. Seriously, it's ridiculous. You're all good for your pay rise, you're all good for your holidays, you're all good for your trips. You're not all good to helping the people that count the most in Australia, and that's the Australian public. And First Nations people are top of the list. They need to be helped. They need to be helped now, because this abuse and sexual abuse is just not tolerated. You wouldn't tolerate it to your family, but you'll let their family suffer. Enough's enough. It's time to say, pull your finger out, get your ass into gear, get up there to these rural countries, rural nations, and sort this shit out. Do what it does, do what it needs to be done. You've got the recommendations. Do it. Well, that's me for a tradie. I certainly hope you like and share this, and I certainly hope you get this out and about, and I certainly hope other people start coming on here and voicing their concerns for our First Nations, because I don't want this happening, not in my generation. I don't want any of this happening. It's not tolerated. It's not acceptable. So our First Nations people need our help, and it's time the wider community stood up and said, you're right, we're here to help you. We got your back. And if this is all I can do for now, is make a video on this, then that's what I'm going to do. But I certainly hope our First Nations people know you're not alone. Don't think for a second that the wider community doesn't care. this video is a detriment to say that I care. And I know what one person says 300 think. So there's 301 you've got that care right now while I do this video. So I certainly hope that the First Nations people can get out there on more media channels, but you really, I honestly tell you, it's a hard thing to do. It's a hard conversation to have, but you need to have it. You've got to put it on the table, because until the wider community knows what I know and knows what you experience, the government's going to do nothing. Absolutely nothing. Well, I'll stop rambling. Trade out. Have a good day. Please like and share, but if you don't share this, at least make your own video, do your research, find out what's happening, and make your own video and put it out there. Let the government know that people are starting to talk about this, and let people know that we're pissed off, because they're spending money on all sorts of shit, but they're not helping out the most important of all issues. That's family. That's family first, you know. So I can't push it enough. Like and share, get this video out, make your own video, put videos out on this stuff. Get the First Nations people the help they require, because they need our help. They're screaming for it. When you see an interview with a First Nations person on TV, that's a call for help. That's a call for rally. And we need to rally behind them on this issue, because who's going to do it if we don't? What, you're going to have 10 First Nations ladies stand on TV every week talk about the same thing? No. They need our help. The wider community, the wider Australian community, from any race, creed or colour. They need our help, and they need it now. So please, like and share. Thank you.